Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hey, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Today's episode was inspired by an article that I somehow came upon on someone's blog. So I want to let everyone know that if you're interested in this sort of topic, you should go to Maggie Dent's blog. It's maggiedent.blogspot.com, I believe, or maggiedent.com. She has really interesting articles, and one of them crossed my desktop. And so we're going to talk about something that was kind of mentioned as, and as I've told you before, people have a body budget. And I went, body budget? What's a body budget? And I sent this article to Alison where we started to look into the body budget and how it impacts young children. So Alison, correct me if I'm wrong here. Basically, the body budget is your body needs a certain amount of everything to function well, including things like glucose, oxygen, cortisol,
hormones,
hormones, sleep, nutrition. We all have
water.
Water. There you go. We all have an individual budget of what we need, which is why, like, if your glucose level is high and it's over budget, that causes problems in your body. All right. So what we need to focus in on for the purposes of this conversation about how the body budget impacts behavior is the level of cortisol in the system. Cortisol being a stress hormone. Right. But my understanding anyway is if anything in your body budget is out of sync, a message goes to the brain. And the message that goes to the brain is that there's a problem out here. There's an emergency. And whenever the brain perceives an emergency, it releases even more cortisol into your bloodstream.
Yes. I think, like, if you're trying to really figure out what this means, is you ever have a really, really horrible night's sleep as an adult and you have to go to work the next day anyway, you're already at a high level of stress because your body did not get enough sleep. So you are snapping at whoever might just normally not tick you off, but little itty bitty things tick you off. Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Maybe there's a red light that you don't normally hit. You get to work and something happened and now you've snapped, because you already were at a really high level of stress simply because you got less sleep that day. So I think that's a good way to, as an adult, to realize, like, oh yeah, that's what your body budget it's already exhausted, right? And now your stress level is already high because of the lack of sleep that you got. And this could happen for anything, right? And even if, like, you didn't eat well, and
it's why people get hangry.
Are not. Yes, this is exactly
it's
right.
why people get hangry, right?
Do not eat well. Okay, like, we are not.
I have family members where if they don't eat by a particular time, they start to get hangry. Their mood shifts.
Yes.
And it has to do with their body budget, right? Something in their body budget is off kilter. And so the brain thinks there's an emergency. It sends more cortisol into the system and we react. Now that reaction in young children is sometimes perceived as an intentional, inappropriate behavior, when actually it's just their body budget isn't in sync or their body budget isn't balanced. It's like, think of your financial budget. When your financial budget isn't balanced, things go awry. When the body budget isn't balanced, things go awry. And we've said in prior episodes that because of brain development, boys, and this is a general statement, I know that things cross gender boundaries or what used to be gender boundaries, but generally speaking, according to the statistics, when boys have strong feelings and emotions, they tend to externalize it. It comes out, and it comes out as physical aggression. They might shove, bite, hit, push. Girls take that same energy and internalize it because of their brain development. And internalizing, they bring it inside, and instead of being physically aggressive, they tend to be verbally aggressive, which, according to this article we read about brain development and body budget, it was really interesting. And the reason that the girls tend to be more verbally aggressive is because that area of their brain is further developed than in the boys. This all goes back to brain development, I think, is my point. Yeah. Nobody's intentionally doing anything.
No. And I think like with girls, that's why, like you're saying, everything gets internalized, and then it gets put in like their internal dialogue kind of thing sometimes. Because sometimes I think they're not quite always expressing it through words too. I think sometimes it gets stuck in there, and it's like in this constant like, oh, I'm not good enough, or this happened, or whatever, and boys instead were like, well, let me just kick the wall. You know what I mean? Let me get this out. Let me run around the room. Let me hit somebody. Let me punch something. Let me throw something, and it gets out, Whereas girls.
So here's like, what happens inside, right? When the boy's body budget is exceeded, the brain apparently tells the body there's an emergency and tells it to secrete more stress hormones into the bloodstream. The more stress hormones you have in your bloodstream, the more energy you have.
Yeah.
And for boys, the way that they can take that uptick of energy and balance it out again is through physicality. They need to do something very physical to come back into balance.
Yeah.
And so they tend to, all of a sudden you'll see, like, it doesn't even need to be physical aggression against another child. It could be all of a sudden you see a child just sort of running around the classroom, trying to expend that energy, right? Yeah. I've seen children just start running back and forth in the classroom, and we're like, whoa, what are you doing? We walk in our classroom. But what the child is trying to do is what the brain has told the body to do, which is ramp up the energy. And now to bring it back into equilibrium, it has to expend it. I've seen children just whirl around the room, just knocking things down in their path, bumping into tables, shoving chairs.
Yes.
And because of the way behavior was thought of in past generations, people tend to think that this is some sort of intentionally aggressive, over the top act by these children with intention. It's not with intention. They're trying to bring their body back into balance by doing it.
Right. And I feel like they don't quite know what's going on inside their bodies yet because they're young, right?
Oh,
like
who
adults,
does?
Yeah, but like adults, I think, no, like, hey, I had a stressful day. I'm going to go for a run. You know what I mean? There's
right.
Not me, but lots of adults who exercise when they get stressed out.
No,
like, I'm going to go for a run.
You're not going to find me saying, let's go for a run.
That ain't going to happen.
No.
But there's many adults have learned, hey, if I go for a run, I know that's going to de-stress me. Then I can go back and be with my family and not be stressed out anymore. Or different adults have different ways of handling their stress. But I think that's kind of apparent, right? But like young kids don't know what's going on. They don't know why they're like, I got to run around and run into the table and throw things around. They don't know, but and so they're just doing it without realizing what's going on inside of their body. But they need to. I think
we can have a lot more empathy for them if we realize something's going on in their body and their brain. Somehow they're out of balance. Some need they have, some nutritional, sleep, bloodstream content, some need they have is not being fulfilled. And it's not always an emotional need. People tend to go to, oh my gosh, that child just needs attention. And yeah, maybe true. Yeah, some children are seeking attention, right? Some children are seeking attention. Some children are seeking attention because their bodies feel so out of control and they don't have another way to do it. And then we'll do something that is the exact opposite of what we now know about brain development. We will look at these children, particularly statistically boys. We will look at them and say, use your words, which we've now learned is impossible when there's too much cortisol in their bloodstreams.
Yeah.
That part of the brain tends to be less developed in most boys than most girls. They have trouble accessing words on a good day because of that. And now we're asking them, when their bodies are all ramped up with this imbalance of their body budget, to go get those words from a part of the brain that's less developed than in others.
Yeah.
Right. So they don't, how long, we've been reading about this, Alice and I, we do our research, believe it or not. How long has the research shown it takes boys to retrieve those words once their cortisol level is high?
Hours. It takes hours, not a couple minutes. Hours.
It takes at least a couple hours, right? Yeah. At least 2 hours, if not more.
Yeah.
Which kind of explains why, when I think about one of my children, who I think his body budget was always sort of off. I just think he always has a lot of cortisol in his system. And so when he would be upset or frustrated and it was truly out of balance, he would do things, and then it would take him a while. And it was like later on in the day when he would come back to us and say, I'm sorry, because it took him that long to get this processed and think about it with using words. Don't forget, we use words to think too. And if you can't retrieve the words once you know them, how are you really thinking things through? So it would be like something would happen in the morning, and maybe late afternoon, evening, he would come to us ready to talk about it.
Yeah. But see, when he was younger, and you didn't know that this was going on, right? I mean, what did you think? It's just, because I think there's some people that they're like, when the child comes to them hours later, they're like, oh yeah, we're over that. Why are we going to talk about it now? But I think we need to then still talk about it, even though it happened hours ago. But I think there's this, especially in school sometimes, where you're just like, all right, whatever. We've done 15,000 things since then. Whatever, we're over it. We're fine. Yeah. And really, no, I think they need to go through that too. They're not actually,
they need the time.
They need the time. Give them the time. Let them come to you 3-4 hours later. Let them come to you the next day if you're a school teacher and talk about it, because that's their process. It shouldn't be not talked about just simply because it happened hours ago. But I think that's
when you say when you say to a child who doesn't have words, use your words, that's very defeating. That's very embarrassing for them and insulting. And we know that about children who are pre or nonverbal. I'm not going to go to a child who has some sort of verbal delay or is too young to have the words. I'm not going to go to them and go, use your words with an expectation that they can use it. Similarly, in many boys, according to the science, they can't access the words when their body budget is out of balance. They just can't. So we have to, I think we need to give them the words and say things like, you can say this, give it to them, but don't expect them to come up with it. And similarly, I wouldn't bring the topic up to them a day later or later, and let them come to you. Yeah. Let them come to you.
You should talk about it if that's what
if they want to talk about it. Yeah. But don't expect them to come up with the words in that moment. That's not going to happen. And remember that behavior is not what prior generations thought it was, which was very black and white, kind of like we're wearing on this video today. Everybody come and see what we're wearing. It was very black and white for adults in prior generations. You did the right thing or you didn't do the right thing. You were good, you were a good kid, or you were a bad kid.
Yeah.
I remember when you were really young and you were first starting to make friends, and with all good intentions, family members might say, don't hang out with that kid. That kid's, that kid's trouble. That kid's a bad kid. It was very black and white.
Yeah, she's a bad influence.
Which may have been true.
true.
May have
Yeah.
been
But I mean,
true,
like,
but it wasn't
still, like,
that
we say that all
simple.
the time. It's not, yeah.
Right.
It's not
It's
that
not
simple.
that simple. A child isn't good or bad.
Right.
Behavior isn't always good and behavior isn't always bad. But things were, for prior generations, were very along those black and white lines. We have to embrace the area between that. We have to embrace that gray area that says sometimes children exhibit challenging behavior for a variety of reasons, including things like their body budget may be out of balance. And we need to make sure that they're getting everything they need to balance that body budget, including a calming atmosphere, understanding from the adults around them, nutrition, oxygen, water. You mentioned when we were looking into this, Allison, you mentioned the water issue in early
The
childhood
water
education.
issue is an issue, okay? Like, because I feel like once you are at school, maybe even at home too, but definitely at school, those kids are not drinking enough water. You are not giving them enough water. Like, to me, like, especially the last school I worked at, they were not drinking enough water at all. The school I worked at before
Couldn't
that,
you?
they did, because they were
Like,
allowed to bring water bottles and they could carry them around, and I let
yeah.
them drink whenever they wanted
I was
to.
just
But
going to say,
previous school
where I used to
worked
work,
at,
they had water. The
yeah,
kids would bring in water bottles or whatever,
Bottles.
and we had them
Yeah.
in containers that were within their reach. So they
Yes.
could go and get their water bottle and drink whenever they were thirsty.
yeah.
They
When I
didn't do
worked,
that where you worked?
not the last school. The school before that, yes. The school that I just came from, no. They weren't allowed to bring water bottles. They didn't want them carrying around water bottles. They had little cups of water that they could fill up at the fountain, but that was it. And once they ran out of cups, they ran out of cups. There was no more water. And it was just like heartbreaking for me, because I was like, water, it's just water. Just let them drink. Who cares? Like they should drink whenever they were thirsty. And I think, like, that was eye-opening to me, because, like, I had spent 7 years at my previous school where it was like, yeah, just bring a water bottle in, we'll fill it up whenever we need to. Like, drink as much as you want. I was drinking water all during the day, So, like, I feel like I think if you're a parent, you need to ask, like, how often can my child drink water? Are they allowed to drink it whenever they're thirsty? Do they have a water bottle at their desk at all times if they're at public school or private school? I think I would ask that, because I think even something as slight as, like, they didn't get enough water that day could really throw off their body budget, And I really didn't even realize it was an issue until I started at that school I worked at last school year, and I just assumed every school was doing it the way we previously did it at the other school, and it's not true. It is not. Like,
Most of the places that I have experienced have a way for children to get water whenever they need it. Similarly, they should be able to go use a toilet or be diapered whenever they need it. And I also want to remind the people who are listening that this isn't just about children. This is about adults too. If your body budget is out of whack, then that's impacting your ability to interact with others, including the children you work with and your coworkers. And I hope you will all think about and look into this body budget thing, because it can be very much impacting your ability to cope with whatever's going on, because the cortisol level in your bloodstream then is also going up. And what do we know about cortisol? We've known for years that it turns off the thinking centers of the brain.
Yeah.
And now we know this whole thing about boys can't access the words, generally speaking, as readily as girls can. And so when thinking centers of the brain are struggling to operate, it's just, you're just going to see this behavior. And I look forward to taking this information back. I'm teaching a college course right now about behavior and behavioral expectations. And I'm looking forward to taking this back to my comments to students, like on their papers, when they're analyzing behavior, to just say, sometimes our body budget for the nutrients and gases and other things that we need, sleep, all that stuff, sometimes our own body budgets are not being balanced, and that can impact the children's behavior as well. So, what's the advice? I think the advice is, don't expect most boys to be able to retrieve those words. It's not going to happen. And figure out why they're out of balance. What were you going to say, Allison?
I was going to say, if you are a teacher listening to this, when the children arrive to your program or your school or your classroom, you have no idea. Like their budget might already have been depleted by the time they got to school. You don't know. They might not have slept well. They might not have eaten breakfast. They might have had an argument with their sibling. You have no idea what went on before they got to school. That also includes the people that you are working with. Okay. So my advice would be, take from this is to give everyone a little bit of grace. If you're a coworker and say they were not friendly that day, they, just be like, what, maybe their body's out of budget. Same with the
Something's
children.
up, yeah.
Start sitting there and be like, what's out of balance here? How can we fix this? If we
at the same time, though, you might not be able to. At the same time, I can't control what families do. And I'm not going to try to, because once families feel critiqued, that's it for your relationship with them. So I'm not going to go back and say, I think the problem with your child's behavior is that your child doesn't get enough sleep and you have no routine. I'm not going back and saying that. Instead, in my early childhood program, I'm going to try and provide this child with what they need. So if the child seems to be hungry, I'm going to give them food. Maybe they didn't eat breakfast that morning. I'm going to let them have a little something to eat. If the child seems tired, I might offer that child an opportunity to rest ahead of everybody else, or to spend a little time in the cozy corner playing alone and see what you need. I'm going to offer that child some downtime in some way. I remember taking children sometimes where even when the families would come in and say, oh, she didn't sleep. Good luck to you today. She got no sleep. I don't think this is going to be a good day for her. I remember taking those children sometimes when they seemed to overwrought, and just, if they wanted to, like, they would sit on my lap and I would rock them a little, and sometimes they would fall asleep. While everybody else is being noisy and playing, this child would fall asleep. And maybe it isn't even, and then we would always say, oh, I wonder if she's getting sick. It may not be that. Her body budget may just be out of balance. Just sleepy. I hope everybody will look into, everybody going now over to your technology and Google body budget, learn about yourselves, learn about the children. And hopefully this will help us to remember that children's behaviors are not always intended. And in fact, in early childhood, I'm going to just propose that they're rarely an intention behind those behaviors. Teenagers are different, but at this stage, there's rarely an intention behind the behavior. The behavior just is what it is for whatever reason. And so we have to teach children how to cope with how they're feeling. And I hope you will join us for our next episode, where we're going to be talking about another thing having to do with behavior and our feelings. And that's it. I'm just going to leave the teaser right there. Okay, folks, find us on Facebook, How Preschool Teachers Do It podcast. Find our website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com. Feel free to do that. And please contact us with your ideas, your quotes, whatever it is you would like us to think about and share. You'll find the contact form on our website.
Yeah.
Hope to hear from you soon.
Bye, peeps.